Did you say he could fight any Trump supporter?
Yeah, he says he kicked, and they're scared of him because he could fix a truck. Like they're threatened by his masculinity. I know how to fix a truck. So he said, like, do you? I bet you don't.
The lady doth protest too much.
I bet you don't.
I fear.
I bet if I bring a broken truck to you and a bag of tools, you're.
This is the guy that wants to be your vice president, calling the #1 entrepreneur in America that gay guy. You understand how weird that is? You just call him that gay guy?
That gay guy. You've never said that. You've never said that.
Adam, how do you feel about that gay guy comment that Tim Walz just made?
Joe Rogan and Patrick Bet-David just teamed up for a no-mercy takedown of Tim Walz that left the Minnesota governor's credibility in shambles. With Rogan's raw, unfiltered fire and Patrick's razor-sharp precision, they exposed Walz as the king of empty slogans and broken policies. From crime surges to business strangulation, nothing was safe. This wasn't a roast.
Have you ever seen that video?
No.
Demolition.
This is what people love about Donald Trump. The fact that he would say this.
But unfortunately, Governor Walz isn't here himself, but don't worry, he'll say that he was. He's going to say he was. I used to think the Democrats were crazy for saying that men have, period, but then I met Tim Walz.
I just, because they're not ready for the common sense questions. Yeah. They're not ready for the simple questions. And when he just sat there when he had no answer, and then he didn't understand the question, and then he said, well, what do you want me to say? And I'm like, oh my God, you're never going to be president. You will not be running in 2028. You're done.
Well, I don't know whether, it was because of that question or not, if he would ever be president, because the way he handled himself in the debate with J.D. Vance, that was that's probably the worst debate performance I've ever seen, aside from Joe Biden's debate with the president, the first one where...
If leadership had a scoreboard, Walz just took a loss louder than fireworks. Joe Rogan didn't just take a jab at Tim Walz. He delivered a full-on verbal beatdown that made mixed martial arts look like a polite handshake. With the intensity of a guy who's seen one too many bureaucrats ruin a good thing, Rogan jumped in with both fists of logic, humor, and pure disbelief. He wasn't playing referee.
We were getting scary close to people justifying totalitarian measures.
I think we need to push back on this.
Tim Walz in the campaign trail was literally saying free speech doesn't include hate speech and misinformation.
There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Hey man, you. Because everything that we called misinformation just a few years ago, it's on the front page of the New York Times now that we were lied to.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice.
Okay, so that was one of the ones that
That's like I think he misspoke, but to say that I'm friends with school shooters, like we hang out on the weekends. I tell them not
friends with a
school shooter.
So that was one of the moments.
And the crowd all rolled into one. And Tim Walz, he was a clueless guy who wandered into the octagon thinking it was a yoga class. Rogan started with the absurdity of Walz's leadership style, governing by gut feeling and press conference, like a guy picking dinner by spinning a wheel of fortune.
If you can play this, the audience
Walz's
is deeply
pandemic
concerned about your
policies were the
question. Go
first
ahead,
target. And Rogan talked.
What is a woman? What is a woman is the question.
I'm not sure I understand the question here.
Well, that.
What do you want me to say?
I want you to say that a woman like me is an adult human female, that men can't become women. You guys are the party of violence, and you're the party erasing women. You don't respect us. You're a bigot. You're a misogynist. You're a sexist. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Or threw them like a grizzly tearing open a tent. 1 minute, businesses were locked tighter than a vault, and the next they were open with rules that sounded more like a dare than a plan.
He was 100% right with Tim Walz.
I know I'm doing something right when the Fox
like someone
News crowd is
blindly
all
guessing their
looking at
way
me
through
like
an
crazy.
escape.
Like, I'm loving it.
That guy was almost the vice president of the United States.
Elon Musk was crying last week. Tim is being mean to me, yeah.
I'm sure you've seen that thing where it shows Obama saying, I need a vice president that's dumber than me.
He may or may not have cognitive decline problems at his age, but at her age, she's just dumb.
Room while reading outdated science magazines. There was no consistency, no real science, And definitely no logic, just a steady stream of nonsense packaged and sold as caution. Rogan mocked the hypocrisy. Big chain stores stayed open while mom-and-pop shops got bulldozed by red tape. He said it felt like Walz was running an experiment.
She's
on how
trying
quickly you
to
could
make
destroy
sense of her
small business
argument.
morale
Are you buying
while
her
protecting
argument?
places
Go ahead,
that
Rob.
You know, if kids are hungry in school, what that does to brain and learning, you're not going to learn to read. So if you're talking about learning to read and closing gaps, then you better take away the barriers for that. If that's tampons, then that's tampons.
Play that one more time. Like,
It's not even registering.
Listen, I have 4 kids, and they've made some arguments that they try to really
tried to do my homework.
Stretch and spin. Is there a greater spin job than Rob? Play that one more time, by the way. It's a little painful, but play.
Inflatable pools and discounted socks. The man had all the decisiveness of a Magic 8 ball, but none of the charm. And when asked for answers, he'd deliver a monologue so dry it could crack mirrors. Then Rogan went after Walz's habit of hiding behind the experts. Instead of leading, he outsourced decisions to people who probably needed their own decisions double-checked. Rogan laughed at how Walz could look at any crisis and instantly decide to form a committee, hold a virtual roundtable, or release a well-edited video that told people absolutely nothing new. It was leadership theater, starring a guy who couldn't act and didn't know his lines. And when it came to health mandates, Rogan went nuclear. He compared Walz's rules to a CrossFit trainer with a personality disorder.
Into power,
random,
like if Kamala
exhausting,
died
and probably harmful.
Tim Walz, Tampon Tim, was our fucking president, you know how crazy this country would be? That weirdo who puts tampons in the boys' room. And what about our joy? Like, he's a complete pathological liar. Like a complete liar. Lied about being in Tiananmen Square. Lied about being a fucking...
But not to a gym. You could sit indoors with strangers at a fast food joint. But God help you if you dared open your yoga studio. Walz didn't follow the science. He followed a Pinterest board of bad ideas wrapped in fear and sprinkled with bureaucracy. But it wasn't just the pandemic. Rogan dug into the education mess, too. Under Walz, Minnesota schools went from high standards to highly confused. Learning loss exploded. Parents were kept in the dark. And students got more screen time than actual instruction. Rogan said Walz treated the education system like it was in beta testing. Every year brought new initiatives, new buzzwords, and less actual learning. It was like trying to fix a broken engine by painting the hood and hoping nobody noticed the smoke. And crime? Rogan was relentless. He compared Minnesota's crime spike under Walz to a bad movie sequel, predictable, loud, and completely avoidable. Law enforcement was either villainized or ignored, and Walz's response was always the same. Say something vague, issue a mild expression of concern, and move on to the next photo op. Rogan said Walz could make a hostage negotiation sound like an HR meeting, zero urgency, zero accountability, and somehow zero results.
Question
then
for
came
everybody.
Patrick Bet-David.
How
No
often
stage
do you
lights,
talk
no warm-up
and
act,
say
just
something
sharp
like,
analysis
hey,
with the accuracy
Vinny,
of a sniper.
you know that gay guy?
Patrick didn't come in
You ever talk to
swinging
people
wild.
like that? I'm just curious, do you talk like that? Do you talk like that? Maybe you're watching this, you're like, I don't want to admit to it because I'm sitting in the bathroom watching this, but just yesterday I told my brother that gay guy. Okay, maybe that's you. That's okay. But guess what? Don't feel bad. Because somebody that's about to be your vice president also says that regularly. He says it so regularly that it's slipped up on.
He came in with bullet points and a grin that said, I've done the math and you're the problem. He went straight for Walz's lack of strategic thinking. According to Patrick, Walz treats leadership like a part-time job with no accountability. When the heat's on, Walz disappears behind a curtain of buzzwords, hoping people will forget. Here's the one holding the extinguisher. Patrick painted Walz as the human version of a paper jam, clogging progress, slowing everything down, and somehow always needing maintenance. Patrick zeroed in on Walz's inability to make bold decisions. Everything is a committee, a study, or a waiting game. Walz reacts. He doesn't lead. Patrick compared it to playing chess by only responding to what your opponent does. No foresight, no planning, just endless scrambling. That kind of leadership, Patrick said, doesn't build prosperity. It just buys time until the next failure. And let's talk economics.
they bring in
Under
her
Walz,
and they bring in this other
Minnesota's
guy who's
budget
radical
ballooned
from
while the
Minnesota.
results shrank.
That's the vice
Taxes
president.
went up, services got
Who
slower, and businesses faced
he
more
believes
red
a
tape
lot
than
of
Christmas
wild
warehouse.
things. One of them is
Patrick
transgender
mocked the
surgery
states
for people who are under 13. Another one is abortion up until 9 months.
Ooh.
Yeah. He changed the Minnesota state flag to make it look like the Somali flag. That stuff scares the fuck out of people.
Session with regulation, pointing out how Walz makes every decision like he's terrified of success. You want to build something? Permit. You want to hire? Bureaucracy. You want to innovate? Better hire a lawyer and 5 consultants first. It was an economy designed for people who hate moving fast. Patrick laughed at Walz's obsession with appearing thoughtful. He said the governor spends so much time considering every option that by the time he acts, the moment's already passed and the consequences are already piling up. Leadership isn't about appearing smart, Patrick said. It's about being decisive. And Walz's track record looks like a how-to guide on stalling until the crowd leaves. Then Patrick tackled the PR machine. Walz, he said, governs through press releases. Every new policy is announced like a product launch, with slogans, talking points, and smiling photos. But when you peel back the packaging, there's nothing there.
We were pitted
No
into
clear
a Hunger
plan,
game against
no
our neighbors to
sustainable
find
solution.
toilet paper.
Just
That's how
another
bad it
round
was. So now, I suppose it wasn't too bad, thinking back to that economy. If you're a billionaire, Elon Musk, for example, say, that guy got it. Michigan knows that word. Look, that dude got a tax cut and the rest of us got shafted on
He
the whole
paid
deal.
$11
That's
billion
how that worked
in
out.
taxes, Tim. How much have you paid in taxes?
Walz's response to social unrest, either. He said the governor folded faster than a lawn chair during moments that demanded backbone. Businesses burned, communities panicked, and Walz held a press conference. No clear defense, no restoration of order, just words stacked on words while the state waited for leadership that never showed up. Patrick said it best, leadership isn't about what you say. It's about what you do when no one else is willing to step forward. And Walz never stepped. He shuffled. The best part? Patrick and Rogan weren't just clowning for laughs. They were calling out a blueprint of failure. Rogan, with his raw, unfiltered outrage and wit. Patrick, with his surgical dismantling of every weak excuse Walz ever leaned on. Together, it was a masterclass in political accountability, with Walz's career as the case study in what not to do. They didn't need direct confrontations. Their points stood tall without any reply. They exposed the hollowness in Walz's governance, the flimsiness of his convictions,
just weird
and
how
the chronic
avoidable
delay
it was.
tactics that
100%
passed for
avoidable,
leadership.
but pathological
They turned
liars,
his talking
people that are
points into
habitual
punchlines
liars,
and his
they just
accomplishments
lie all the
into
time about
cautionary
everything.
tales. What Walz calls progress, they revealed as overregulation, fear-driven policy. And the gradual erosion of public trust. And then they turned to culture, because Walz wasn't just running a state, he was dragging its culture through a blender of confusion. Rogan called out the silencing of dissent, the way independent thought was labeled dangerous, and how, under Walz, compliance was rewarded more than creativity. Minnesota wasn't just becoming less free, it was becoming less interesting. Patrick drove the nail in further. He said, when you punish risk-takers and elevate bureaucrats, you don't get innovation. You get stagnation. Under Walz, the only thing that seemed to grow was the government payroll. Entrepreneurs were leaving, investors were wary, and the average citizen was drowning in paperwork. It wasn't just bad policy, it was anti-progress. By the end of their separate roasts, Walz didn't just look ineffective,
One of my favorites was that Tim Walz tried to claim that his wife got pregnant through in vitro fertilization, and she said that's not true. So he lied about that.
Some of you might have heard this. This is very personal for my wife and I. When Gwen and I decided to have children, we went through years of fertility treatments. And I remember each night praying that the call was going to come and it was going to be good news. The phone would ring, tenseness in my stomach, and then the agony when you heard the treatments hadn't worked.
The First Lady of Minnesota, Gwen Walz, revealed that she underwent a different fertility treatment, not IVF, called intrauterine insemination.
What a weird guy he was.
His wife had to come out and say he was lying. That guy lied about everything. He lied about being a head coach. He was an assistant coach. Lied about his military rank. Lied about whether or not he served in a war.
MIC drop. Just a lingering sense that Minnesota deserved more, that voters were watching, business owners were packing, and comedians and entrepreneurs were now the ones doing the heavy lifting of asking tough questions. And they weren't done. There were still unanswered policy disasters, still communities waiting for action, still countless examples of bureaucratic incompetence waiting to be torn apart. And as long as Tim Walz kept showing up with a slogan and no plan, you could bet Joe Rogan and Patrick Bet-David would keep firing shots with the accuracy of men who had both the facts and the fury. Patrick wasn't ready to leave the podium just yet. He dug even deeper into Walz's record, pointing out how the governor managed to weaponize mediocrity into a full-time profession. Every initiative under Walz came with lofty goals, vague deliverables, and results so underwhelming they could be used as a sleep aid.
Dumb.
I think I was saying that I need a vice president dumber than me.
Kamala Harris may be the dumbest person ever elected vice president in American history.
Kamala saying I need a vice president dumber than me. It's Walz. Men have tampons.
We have a lot of public safety. We haven't taken adequate credit for
Instead
it.
of leading with
We got to
clarity,
do a better
Walz
job of
responded
getting
to
the word out about what we have accomplished and who did it.
You got to lose because we got to break this cycle.